Okay, hello everyone, and welcome to Global Communication 2. Today is a makeup lecture. I'm going to be talking about how to prepare for a job interview, some things to keep in mind when you are actually at an interview trying to get a job. I have quite a bit of experience with job interviews on both sides of the desk. I have obviously had many job interviews in my life, and I have also been the person interviewing other people for a job. So I think this gives me a fairly well-rounded perspective on what people need to be ready for when they sit down and try and interview for a job. I'll just quickly bring up my PowerPoint and then we will get started. Here we go. I do feel like I'm coming down with a bit of a cold today, so if my voice is not as strong as it usually is, you'll just have to bear with me. Okay, so I want to talk today about how you can prepare for a job interview. And there are a few reasons why I want to do this lecture. It's actually very good that it's on YouTube now, because if you want to go back and watch it anytime, you can. I hope that if you ever want to come back and review this, the video is always here for you. But there are many reasons why I'd like to talk about this. Some of the things that we do in class are quite interesting from an intellectual perspective, but they may not be as practical as I would like. They might not have a lot of application outside of either the classroom or academia. But one day you are going to graduate from university, enter the real world, and try and get a job. And when you do that, you will need to be ready for the experience of going for a job interview. We don't stay students forever, so it's important that you prepare now by picking up the skills and the knowledge necessary to pass a job interview. As I mentioned a few moments ago, I have not only went through many job interviews in my life, but I've also been the person that interviews others for a job. And I think this gives me a pretty unique perspective on what students need to keep in mind when they go for a job interview. I think this will probably be the most practical advice that I can possibly give you. Now, I'm not going to talk about the actual job search. That is a whole other lecture, and depending on what country you're in and what type of job you're looking for, the process of actually finding a job might be different. And the way that you prepare your resume, cover letter, all of that, follow-up emails, all of those things are beyond the scope of the interview, or all beyond the scope of today's lecture. Today, I simply raise camera there. Today, I simply want to talk about what you should do after a company has called you or contacted you and said, please come in for an interview. So just a quick heads up, no two interviews are the same. So depending on what type of job you are going to be interviewed for, more or less of this advice may be applicable. There are different circumstances, obviously, depending on the industry and the job. And not only that, but the interview experience changes as you get older. The type of job interview you have when you first finish university and you are probably going to get hired for an entry-level position, that's a very different interview from, 10 years from now, when you've got a lot more experience on your resume and in your career, and you're looking to go job hopping and to find a different gig. So also, I put a little asterisk here. Interviews change with experience, and so does your resume. Before I begin the actual advice on job interview skills, I just wanted to say something about your resume. One of the I guess, sort of sad facts of life is when you first graduate from university, your university degree will probably take up a significant portion of your resume because you don't really have very much job experience. And so the fact that you graduated from a university like Sagang and your major, possibly even your grades, these are things which are selling points for a potential employer. But as you get older and you get more experience, the amount of space that you dedicate to your university degree on your resume shrinks to the point where after however many years that it's been since I graduated from university, my university degree really isn't much more than one line. You know, the name of the university, the major, and the date that you graduated. And it's a little sad to think, wow, I spent 4 years, studying and, not to mention all the stress of trying to get into a university. And after you graduate, look forward a few years and you'll find that your degree becomes relegated to just one or two lines on your resume as the job experience becomes more important. So just something I've noticed in my own life as I've gained more experience. Okay, so time to get down to brass tacks. A company has called you and they have said, come in for a job interview. So what should you do? I would say the first thing you should do is sit down. Actually, you should probably do this before the company even calls you because it's always good to be prepared. Sit down and make a list of 5 key strengths, some sort of core competency, something that you do well, something that distinguishes you from other job applicants. Look at yourself in a mirror and ask yourself, what will sell me to an employer? Because a job interview is about marketing. You are marketing yourself to a potential employer and hoping that they will select you and not somebody else. So try and think of 5 things that make you desirable to a possible employer. Classify them, like what type of strength is it? Rank them in terms of importance. If you think one strength is like the most important on the list. And when you go for the job interview, stick to those talking points. Every question that they ask you should somehow be related to one of those 5 key strengths. Try and stay focused on that because a job interviewer will not remember everything that you say during the interview, but you want them to remember what distinguishes you from other job applicants. So what kind of key strengths might you talk about? What are things that would make you desirable to an employer? I would give these 5 categories as an example. The value and quality of your work experience, the value and quality of your academic credentials, your stability and reliability as a worker, your versatility, meaning how adaptable you are, or your work ethic. And last of all, your interpersonal skills, your ability to work with others, your ability to work as a productive member of a team. Now, if you don't have very much work experience now, don't worry. One of the big weaknesses that young people have when they first enter the job market is they don't have a lot of work experience. But don't think that just because you don't have related job experience that you have no experience. That might not be true. If you worked a part-time job, there might be something about that part-time job that you could say helped you prepare for this current position that you're looking for. If you worked part-time at a convenience store, you have experience dealing with customers, talking to people face to face. You are also responsible for cash. Although these days people pay with cards and apps a lot more frequently, that's quickly disappearing, but you're still responsible for money. These are all important things. The value and quality of your academic credentials, trying to show that your schoolwork has some practical value related to the job you're applying for. Your stability and reliability as a worker. This I cannot stress enough. The world is full of people that are surprisingly unreliable. And that simple ability to be reliable, the company can count on you to come into work every day, be on time, and get the work done and get along with others. That's something that I think is very important. And it's something that's worth pointing out. Your versatility, your work ethic, your interpersonal skills, all those things too. So try and think about what is valuable about your work experience. How do your academic credentials distinguish you from other people? Try to have an example of how stable and reliable you are as a person and how this will be beneficial to the company. How well you can adapt to different work environments, or just your ability to work hard, no matter how hard something gets, the ability to work under a deadline. These are all good. And finally, your ability to work as a member of a group, because a lot of jobs are collaborative in nature, meaning you're not sitting by yourself, isolated from other people. You might have to work with coworkers, and in that case, they need somebody that is able to communicate well, as well as be a good listener. Okay, next. One of the common mistakes that young people do when they are going for their first job interview, or one of their earliest job interviews, is they try to write down all of the possible answers to all of the possible questions that the interviewer could ask, and then they try to memorize them. And this is especially true when it's in English. If you're interviewing for a job in English, and English is your second language or your third language, I would say no, don't do it. No one wants to hear a long memorized answer. No one's going to remember it. And job interviewers can easily see when you have just memorized an answer and it comes off sounding very insincere. What you want to do is make sure that whatever question people ask you, you're somehow going to relate to one of those 5 points. Be ready to paraphrase them, to put them in other words. Remember to have specific details and examples. If you tell the job interviewer, for example, that you have a very strong work ethic, I work very hard, you better have a specific example to support that idea. Because if they ask you, okay, can you tell me about a time when you really showed your work ethic? If you're like, I always work hard, it's not going to impress the job interviewer, and it will sound like you just memorized an answer and you don't actually have anything to back it up. So remember to have specific examples and details. The job interviewer is not going to remember much. Let me tell you that for certain. Having done job interviews myself, sometimes interviews can be 20 minutes or 30 minutes long, depending on the job, maybe longer. If a job interviewer has to interview 5 or 6 people in a day, and sometimes they do more. Sometimes interviews are done over a series of days. How much do you think they're really going to remember? They're not going to remember much. Make sure that they remember those 5 points. So if possible, every question should somehow be directed back to one of those 5 points. Something about how your school life prepared you for this, something about the value of your work experience, possibly your ability to work as a member of a team, your reliability as a person, you know, you're always going to be there on time and get the job done. Maybe your versatility or your work ethic, something like that. Okay, next. There are 2 things which you have to know about very well in order to pass a job interview. You have to know about yourself, and you also have to know about the company that you are applying to. There's an old Chinese classic on war strategy. It's called The Art of War by Sun Tzu. And it lists a few things that you need to do in order to win a battle. You need to know your enemy, and you also need to know yourself. Now, you'll notice here that knowing the enemy is put at number 1. Knowing yourself is put at number 2. Both of these are very, very important. But if you want to defeat the enemy, self-knowledge is not sufficient. You need to know more about the enemy, because your knowledge of the enemy is what helps you prepare for the battle. And a job interview can kind of be similar. Yes, you need to know about those 5 key core strengths that are important and distinguish you from other people. But you also need to be able to distinguish one company from another. If you're going to be interviewed at company A and B, you better know a lot about both of those companies. If you're just going to have one single job interview, you better do some research, because the way you answer questions will greatly depend on what type of company it is and what that company is looking for. If you don't know well what the company is looking for, then you won't be able to prepare answers that will match what they want. And so you need to know what the company's looking for. Like, are they looking for someone that is a specialist, you know, someone that has a very specific skill and can do a particular job? Or are they looking for somebody with general knowledge, enthusiasm, and adaptability? Whatever the company is looking for, do your research and find out about it. The more you know, the better you can sell yourself as the perfect candidate. Okay, now let's talk a little bit about job interviewers. No 2 job interviewers are the same. And yeah, no 2 job interviewers are the same. I've had many job interviews, and each person has been different. Some have been some kind of scary, others much more friendly. I've had a couple of job interviewers that clearly didn't know what they were doing. There is a wide variety of people out there that do job interviews. Some job interviewers are very experienced and they know what they're doing. Some job interviewers will actually become your coworkers. It might be a superior that is doing the job interview, or it might just be somebody from human resources and you'll never see them again. When I was the head teacher of a language institute many years ago, and I did job interviews, the people that I interviewed, I would be working with every day. So I was extremely careful about who I chose, because if I made a bad decision in hiring, I would be working with that mistake every day for a year. And for me, that made it vital that I chose the right person. Okay. Some job interviewers can be a little bit scary, and it's not just because they look intimidating, but they ask hard questions. You sit down with them and they ask questions that are really good at picking out what your strengths or weaknesses might be, especially your weaknesses, because they're trying to weed out the bad applicants. This sort of interviewer will probably already have your resume memorized, or at least part of it memorized, and they'll have the resume with them and they might refer to it a few times. This sort of interviewer is very aware that some people aren't really well suited for a job, but they will apply because they want to make money. They want to get a job and earn a salary. So the job of this interviewer is to try and find out who is well matched for this job and who isn't. And they can ask some pretty hardball questions. A hardball question is a question that is one you probably wouldn't expect. And the way you answer those questions will probably determine whether you get the job or not. On the other extreme, and I've had a couple of interviewers like this, you might get a job interviewer who's very inexperienced. Maybe the regular person got sick and they had to find a substitute rather than reschedule the job interview. You might have the person sitting there clearly uncomfortable and thinking, this isn't my job. I'm not supposed to be doing the interviews. This might be true if it's a small company as well. This person will probably be unfamiliar with your resume. This is, for me, a red flag. If you sit down with an interviewer and they spend half the time looking at your resume because they don't know who you are. So you went to school at, you graduated from Sogong with a major in engineering. How did that major help you prepare for this job? That's a sign that the person really doesn't know how to do a job interview very well. Or if the person is simply working off a generic list of questions that were given on a piece of paper or a file on their tablet, something that was probably supplied by HR, then the person really doesn't have an idea of what they're asking. That would definitely be the most unprepared. Sometimes job interviewers bring in emotional baggage from outside of the office. Maybe they're tired. They might be sick. They might have had a fight with their boss just before they came in and sat down with you. And these are all things that can affect the mood of the interview. Yeah, a bad interviewer has no idea who you are. They tend to frown and have long pauses while they look at your resume. One of the worst things that can possibly happen in a job interview is when they ask you a question and then 5 minutes later, they ask you the same question again because they haven't really been listening. This sort of interviewer would probably stay away from hardball questions, the really difficult questions, because they really don't know how to ask those questions. They don't really know how to dig and find out who is well matched for the job and who is the person that is not very prepared. So the questions generally are easy to predict and easy to answer. But here's the thing. It's hard to hit a home run with a softball question. Baseball analogy. If somebody throws you the softball question, it's really hard to hit a home run because the questions themselves aren't going to distinguish you from anybody else. It's the hardball questions, those really difficult ones that most people will not answer well. But if you do answer well, it will really improve your chances. And you often don't get that with the unprepared or inexperienced job interviewers. Okay, so just to quickly review. Yep, before you go for the job interview, hey, before you even apply for the job, try and write down a list of your 5 key points. You want to predict at least 4 or 5 questions that the interviewer might ask. Also prepare answers, but remember, don't memorize the answers. Maybe write them down in point form. Practice paraphrasing them, putting them in other words. the important thing is you want to sound sincere. You don't want to have a long memorized answer that anybody could recite. Interviewers come in all shapes and sizes, and you should be ready for both softball questions, because they will ask a few, and the hardball questions, the ones that will separate the wheat from the chaff, meaning separating the great applicants from the mediocre applicants. So here are a few questions that you should expect. What do you do at your current job? Why did you leave your previous job? How would you describe yourself? Why do you want to work here? Why did you apply for this position? What did you learn in your major that is applicable here? What's your greatest strength? What's your greatest weakness? Tell me about a time that you collaborated with a coworker. How do you communicate effectively at work? Just a quick note on one or two of these questions. What do you do at your current job? That's a question that will come up if you are currently employed and you're looking for another job. If you already have a job and you are going to a job interview, the person will probably ask you, what do you do at your current job? And they're probably going to ask you, why do you want to leave? You've already got a job. What is it that is unsatisfactory about your current job? And why do you think that things would be better at our company? And this is a question you better be prepared for. Another question that you should always be prepared for too, if you have a previous job on your resume, let's say you stopped working at a company a few months ago, and now it's been a few months, and now you have a job interview at another company. If that happens, they're probably going to ask you, why did you leave your last job? And you have to be very careful how you answer that question, because you don't want to sound too negative, you know, like, it was a horrible place to work, and my manager was a jerk, and, you know, my coworkers were idiots. Answering a question like that will be the first step in getting your resume thrown in the garbage, and you don't want that. So let's take a look at a couple of questions in detail. All right. This is, oh, yeah, good. This is one of the hardest questions, I think. What is your greatest weakness? Because the job interviewer is asking you to say something negative about yourself. This is a job interview. I want to make myself seem like the perfect candidate. If I talk about a weakness, then how is that going to help me? So it's all about, how do you approach this question? Don't emphasize a serious weakness that really would make you look bad. You want to have a weakness that is relatable or understandable, something where the person could say, yes, I can understand why you have that weakness. And part of that is the interviewer wants to know if you are self-aware, because if someone is self-aware and they understand what their strengths and weaknesses are, if you are conscious of a flaw, that's the first step in overcoming that weakness. And you can show that you're focused on improving a particular thing. So try and be truthful and sincere, because a good interviewer can smell garbage. That's shite. And if you give an example, or if you give an answer that does not sound realistic or sounds contrived, or clearly is not a weakness that is clearly not a weakness that you're trying to get over, then the job interviewer will probably think that you're not answering the question truthfully. You want your weakness to be realistic, reasonable, and surmountable, something that you can overcome. For example, one of the biggest weaknesses that young people have when they enter the job market is a lack of experience. And if you don't have very much experience, well, you need more training and you don't do the job possibly as fast as somebody else. These are things that are very realistic and understandable. They can be expected. There are a couple of other weaknesses that you could point out, but I think one of the easiest ones to say is I have a lack of experience. And it's through this job that I will, learn how to uh, become, much more skilled at this particular thing. By the way, one of the things that you should try and do with this question, your greatest weakness, is to try to put a positive spin on it. And I think that lack of experience is not always a bad thing, because sometimes people with a lot of experience come with preconceived ideas about how a job should be done. That means that someone with 10 years experience doesn't want the company to tell them how they should do their job. They feel they already know how to do it. Look, I've done this sort of job at other companies. I don't need you to tell me how to do it. And sometimes they don't follow the new company's protocol. A relatively inexperienced person can say, you know what, I don't come with any preconceived ideas. I'm a blank slate. Everything that you train me to do, I will follow that to the letter. I'm not going to try and do things like I did them at another company, or I'm not going to try and, do things my way because I think they're better. I'm going to follow exactly what the company says I should do, because I don't bring in the expertise and the confidence from having a lot of experience at another job. Why should we hire you? Okay, this is a great one. We get applications from so many different people. Why should we hire you? What distinguishes you from the other people that have applied to this job, applied for this job? And this is where your research will become valuable. Remember, know thyself, that's rule number 2. Know thy enemy, that's rule number 1. So try to match your character or qualifications with the company's core values and proposed ideal type. And trust me, the company does have an idea of the sort of person that they're looking for, not just the education and experience. A lot of companies have their own corporate culture. They're looking for a certain personality type. What type of personality are they looking for? That's what you need to know and be able to show how well you match what the company is looking for. Why do you want to work at this company? This is a similar question. A lot of these questions are going to be kind of asking the same thing, but just in different words. If someone asks you, why do you want to work here? You don't want to be, I guess, too honest and just say, look, I need a job. You guys are hiring. Good money too. Working here would look great on my resume. I work here for 1 or 2 years. I can get an awesome job anywhere. No, you don't want to say that. That's too honest. Or if you just say, the company is well respected and is a leader in the industry, that's very generic. It's something that anybody could say. You might have 20 applicants and they will all say, this company is a leader in the industry and is very well respected for its high quality something. Trust me, that it's not an answer that's going to distinguish you from other people. You don't want to sound too wishy-washy either, It looks pretty nice, I guess. It seems like a good place to work. No. You want to sound like this company is a great match and you are a great match for the company. Whatever you do, don't try to be funny. Sometimes people will try to be funny in a job interview, especially if they're nervous. They might try to break the tension by telling a joke. In 90% of the times, in 90% of job interviews, if you try to include humor, it's not going to come off very well. So unless you are a professional comedian, I would say try to keep it serious and don't tell jokes. So what can you do? Try to match the job with your long-term career goals. Match the job with your passion and enthusiasm for certain things. Maybe you are very interested in logistics or statistics. And this is not just something that you will be doing at the company because it's your job, but it's something that you have a passion for. Maybe you're very interested in baseball and you've been analyzing baseball statistics or something for years, and you can talk about this at great length. You are not just doing this as a job. This is part of who you are inside the office and outside the office. That sounds much more sincere. Try to match the job with the company's goals and the core values that it has. That will distinguish you from other people. Okay. They might ask you then, what kind of environment do you work in best? So, do you like to work nights? Do you prefer to work days? Do you like to work alone? Do you prefer to work in a group? Whatever the environment is that you are most likely to work in, obviously you will say that that is the best or your preferred work environment, and you should have real life examples to show how you can work well in that kind of environment. But it's also a good idea to be able to give an opposite example. If you strongly prefer working in a group environment, also have a separate answer just in case they ask that shows that you can also work with minimal supervision. You can work alone because sometimes jobs will have a little bit of both. Maybe 80% will be working by yourself, but 20% will be working as part of a team, or vice versa. You should be able to have a preference for the type of work environment, but also be able to show the employer, yes, this is my preferred work environment, but I can also do various work environments and excel in them, because that is something that they want to see as well. Oh, I know the job is mostly working with coworkers, but can you work by yourself? If there's minimal supervision, can we count on you to get the job done if you're not part of a group? Do you prefer to be a leader? Do you prefer to be a follower? Don't put all of your eggs in one basket. Be ready to show that you have preferences, but you can work in any type of environment. Another question that might come up is where they will ask you to talk about a difficult experience or possibly a hard choice that you had to make. I would say the best thing to do is to keep it work related. Talk about how you overcame a problem at work, maybe a misunderstanding with a coworker or a tough deadline. I would strongly advise that you don't include a personal story, even if the story is true. Like, let's say when you were 18 years old, you had a big fight with your parents and you left your parents' house and you had to try and survive living on your own. Although that story might be true and from my perspective shows a great deal of personal strength, you don't know that job interviewer and you don't know how they are going to listen to that story and react. The person might get the wrong impression. Remember, you don't know the interviewer and they're not your friend. So be careful what you do talk about. Personal stories can backfire. So I would say the best thing to do is focus on something work related and then talk about how you overcame it. What resources did you use? And this can include interpersonal skills because a lot of difficult experiences are social in nature. And then talk about what you learned from the experience. One possible thing you might do, like if you don't have a lot of work experience, maybe you just had The last 4 years you've been busy studying, right? You could say something about how there was a time when you were very busy with school, but you still had to, I don't know, prepare for something with your family. So trying to balance your school life and your personal life and what you did in order to balance that, how you learned. That also shows time management, right? Not only responsibility, but time management. Those are the sort of qualities that employers are looking for. And the more details you can give, what resources you used to overcome the problem, and what you learned from it, that will be impressive. Whatever you do, don't talk about a difficult experience that you were not able to solve, because that will just make it look like you are unable to solve it. And employers want to find someone who can solve problems. Okay, next up, group interviews. Oh yeah, there are many different types of interviews. You can have one-on-one interviews. You could have group interviews where there is one interviewer and several interviewees, or a panel interview. A panel interview is when there are several interviewers and then one interviewee. It's important to be respectful, confident, and listen carefully. This is especially true if there's, let's say, 3 other people, right? You and 3 other candidates. You're all sitting there and they're asking you different questions. Sometimes they will ask one question and then everybody gets a chance to answer the same question. And when one person's talking, everybody's trying to prepare their answer in their mind. But this is a chance for you to show social skills that you wouldn't normally show in a traditional interview. So when the other people are answering questions, listen. Because one of the questions that sometimes comes up is, based on what you know about the other candidates here, who would you hire and why? So let's say you and 3 other candidates are in a group interview and it's been going on for 30 or 40 minutes. Everybody's answered a few questions. And then the interviewer asks you, okay, based on what you know about the other candidates here, who would you hire for the job and why? You can't say yourself. Now, if you haven't really been listening to what the other people say, you probably won't be able to answer this question well. But if you can say, based on what I know, I think this person here would be an excellent fit for the job, because when they answered this question this way, it showed how their passion is clearly matched with the company's core values, or their ability to solve a problem would be very beneficial to the company, as they talked about in this question. That shows that you've got good social skills and you know how to listen, even in a stressful situation. And that's a question, by the way, who would you hire and why? That's a question that a lot of people are not prepared for. Be prepared. Okay, a few last words before I finish the lecture. Number 1, never turn down an interview. It's hard enough getting a job interview as is. So if you apply for a lot of jobs and let's say a company contacts you and you've decided that you're not really interested in that job anyway, and maybe you have another job interview scheduled at another company, you might think, you know what? I really want to work at that company anyways. And I've got this other interview coming up next week. Don't turn it down. Never turn down an interview. Job interviews, the ability to do a job interview well is kind of like the ability to dance. The first few times that you try dancing in a club, for example, you're going to be horrible because you don't know what you're doing. You have no experience. But the more you do it, the more confident you get, and you develop your own style. And that's very similar to a job interview, because if you have only had 1 or 2 job interviews, it's a very stressful experience because it's unfamiliar. But the more experience you have, the easier it will be, because you will have more experience answering similar questions, and you will be able to be more relaxed in the job interview. Trust me, there's nothing wrong with going to a job interview for a job that you're not interested in anymore. In some ways, it's the best because the stakes are low. Actually, there are no stakes. You sit down, you're relaxed. What's the worst that can happen? They don't give you the job. You don't want the job anyways. It's just practice. It's just practice. And you know what? What might happen is in the middle of the interview, you might realize that you actually do want the job. Oh, you know what? Before, I didn't think it was a very good job, but now that I'm actually here and I'm listening to the interviewer and I'm learning more about the position, wow, actually, maybe I do want this job. Well, in that case, you're in the chair. You're in the interview. You're halfway there. Keep going. So never turn down an interview and never ghost an interview. If you have an appointment for a job interview, never, pull a no-show. Nothing is more unprofessional, and it's so bad for the interviewer too, because they've got interviews scheduled for that day. And if there's nobody waiting, then that just means they have to wait in an empty room until the next applicant comes, and it's extremely unprofessional. So never do that. Also, remember to thank the interviewer at the end, regardless of how well the interviewer has gone. Be polite, be courteous, thank them for their time. And if you don't get the job, and this is going to happen sometimes, maybe you do everything right. You answer every question well. You follow all of the advice that I've given in this lecture, as well as other advice. There's plenty of advice you can get from different experts. And for some reason, they just don't hire you. Now, it might be that you've lost a great opportunity through no fault of your own, but it could also be the company just made a really big mistake. Sometimes people get hired when they shouldn't. And I've worked with people, and trust me, as you go through life and you meet different people and you'll learn about the different companies that they work at, everybody will have a story about a coworker that was horrible at their job, whether it's a teacher, engineer, a mechanic, some sort of artist that works collaboratively with other people, in publishing, in the food industry, whatever industry it is. You're going to talk to some people and they'll be like, you know what? I once worked with this person and I have no idea how they got through that job interview, because this person was a nightmare to work with. Maybe it was your loss by not getting the job, or maybe it was the company's loss. Maybe they chose the wrong person. Either way, don't give up. The only way to secure employment is to not give up, regardless of how many times you get rejected or how many resumes you send out that don't result in a callback. Never give up, because the only way that you're going to get a job is by trying until you get enough interviews, and then you get the job that you want. And it might not be a job that you want at first. Sometimes you might have to do a few different jobs that are stepping stones. But you're not going to get those stepping stones if you give up. So never give up. Make sure you do your research. Know what you're going to say before you go into the interview, and just do your best. All right. So I think I've talked enough for this makeup lecture. I hope you enjoy it. Enjoy the weekend and stay cool.